Music was my escape, I guess, from things I didn't like in life.
We were NFG for like a couple of years, and then we couldn't get a gig, right? We were a punk band.
And it took us, like, I think a good 2 years before we actually have formed a band, Crash 80s, and when we finally did, I remember Rob Brent coming up to us and saying, like, you know, what took you so long?
Baby, baby, don't you know I like your skin? Baby, baby, won't you please let me in?
Simon Lewis was a Fanshot student, and he wrote a whole bunch of that early stuff, and then he left. Obviously, he was a student, and it was time to go, so he quit, and then we got Mark Scott. We couldn't get a gig, so we just said, well, we'll change our name. We couldn't get a gig anywhere in London or outside of London, so we just changed it, just thought of some names and came up with that.
Back when we were going to see other bands prior to punk bands, if a band made a mistake on stage, it was, oh my God, this can't happen. But Monroe did it, they laughed, they just kept playing. It was really, literally like a freight train. You just got out of the way.
Around, and I tired of being kicked when I'm down. And I had it to here, and I had it to there. And I tell you, man, I don't like it no more. Bad, bad rock and roll. Bad, bad rock and roll.
The problem with punk culture is that not everything about it fits neatly into one box. There was an art school spark from the get-go. And politics can rear its head in any culture or subculture, and the punks weren't immune. They were feeling divisions throughout society and within the group. As one person recalled, some of them would show up at the bar in full OK Corral drag, like the popular Earp Brothers, in black frock coats, vests, and cowboy boots. They weren't part of the little clique.
Or they were always dressed like cowboys. They all had cowboy hats on at that point, and guns, and all that kind of thing.
I still had long hair then. They were all bugging me to get a haircut. The only one that told me not to was Jimmy Weatherstone from the Demics, the drummer. He told me not to listen to anybody. If I didn't want to cut my hair, not to bother.
I was more long hair, heavy metal, southern rock, kind of like rocker dude. I hooked up with Scott, and he introduced me. I was 18 years old. He used to sneak me into Fry's, and wow, man, this is what it's all about. This is real music, you know. It's none of this lighter stuff.
Scott was one of those characters I was aware of before NFG or 63 Monroe formed. When I was about 11, 12 years old, I grew up in the West End of London. And I used to hop on the bus and come downtown to buy records. There was always this guy hovering around downtown with really long hair, rocking clothes, just stood out from everybody. Scott, the lead singer from 63 Monroe.
And we'd see people get beat up and some of the abuse that they used to take. I felt pretty strongly about it, and what fueled it was getting attacked. I mean, it made you feel even more justified in what you were doing. It made me feel like this is right. This is something that I should be involved in. This is good for me. This is part of my identity. I'm really identifying with this.
The media gets a hold of something and they start feeding all this fear and stuff into the paper, and maybe that's the only way that you'll learn about what's happening at the Blue Boot. You'll read in the paper, oh, punk rockers stab each other on the dance floor.
Another world beyond the doors.
The Free Press every now and then would write about the punks down at the Cedar Lounge, right? If you want to see some punk music, go down to the Cedar Lounge, right?
If you had orange hair and went to your high school back when I was going to high school, you'd probably get the crap beat out of you, or you'd be a total pariah, right?
You would get the jocks or just the downtown rocker types who went there just looking for trouble. More often than not, when you went to the lounge, there was people there looking to see what trouble they could kick up.
Well, Pete, our bass player, had booked us a gig at the Park Hill Arena, and the Kinsmen were putting on a dance, you know, their monthly dance. So they wanted a band to play, so we went. They hired us. $1,200, bring your PA. We're playing in an arena, licensed gig, right? So everybody in Park would think 63 Monroe is a 60s cover band, right? So they think they're going to be hearing all the old classics. We're pretty, glammed, punked, the whole 9 yards. And we show up and set up, and like everybody's just kind of going, what's going on here? This is terrible, right? We're just playing. All of a sudden, I'm up on stage playing, and my friend's up dancing, and all of a sudden, this big old redneck boy comes by and just cold cocks him, right? Down. He's down. He's out. He's on the floor, right? My girlfriend is like, she goes after, and he gives her a smack too, right? So I come running off the stage, and I boot the guy, and the drummer comes over the drum kit, the guitar players come down with it. So there's this huge melee in the middle of the park. We go in the dressing room, the guy running the show goes, here's your money. The show's over. Thanks for coming out. I said, okay, fine, let's get the hell out of here. We go to leave. Somebody had taken all the valve stems out of our van, so we couldn't drive. So we couldn't even leave to get out of town.
One time in the Vic Tavern, another upscale joint we were playing at, and we had this wild drunken man, and then all of a sudden he took one of the bar stools with the arms on, like the bar chairs with the arms coming out, and he grabbed it, it was facing towards him, and he smacked it down on the ground, and the arm broke off, and this was while we were playing, and we already knew he hated punk rock. So, Johnny O and I were looking at each other. We were on a stage. There was, 5 of us in the band at that time, so there was no room to move at all. And Johnny O and I are kind of looking at each other, and I'm thinking to myself, Johnny, one of us is going to die.
Surprised they survived it. And they're not as bitter as I am about living in a town. I mean, that kind of thing, that's just asking for it. Someone's gonna throttle you out in the parking lot or right there on stage. I gotta admire them for going out and doing something like that.
When we come back, looking for the lost port, trying to cross the border, and women in punk music.
You